Greetings, comrades. You know, the video on this topic was long overdue, and of course I should have made it maybe last year. But I didn't really want to. After all, labor camps are far from the most pleasant page in the history of my country, and talking about them is not very enjoyable. To be honest, I did not want to make a video on this topic at all. But recently one thing has happened that forced me to make this video. What was it? Alexander Kalashnikov, head of the Russian Federal Penitentiary Service, declared the need to revive labor camps for prisoners in Russia. Yes, that's right. They really want to restore those very same forced labor camps in Russia. Those very same Gulag camps. This is not an April Fool's joke, not a clickbait and not some fake news. These are the words of the head of the federal agency. Let's discuss this. How in the modern world could anyone even come up with this idea? Were labor camps so effective in the USSR? So let us begin with a brief explanation of this, of course, shocking information. Where in the world did the officials get such an idea? We live in a modern society. We are kind of an European state. If you look at our neighbors, a psychopath who murdered 70 children is living in comfortable conditions, rolling around on his soft bed and playing new PlayStation exclusives all day long. How in such a world could the idea of reviving the hard forced labor of prisoners arise? The moral side of the question aside, there really is some logic to it. According to the head of the Federal Penitentiary Service, there are 482,000 people in Russian prisons who have the right to participate in the labor market, and another 188,000 people who are sentenced to prison labor, and also hundreds of thousands of people who want to work but don't have such opportunity. All of them, according to the head of the Federal Penitentiary Service, can be sent to the large industrial facilities, where there is a shortage of manpower. Also, according to him, it is possible to recruit convicts in areas where previously mostly migrant workers were employed. Because of the pandemic, foreigners cannot come to Russia easily nowadays, so there's a huge shortage of workers in these areas. It will not be a gulag. There will be completely new, decent conditions, because this person will be working within the framework of a dormitory or renting an apartment, maybe together with his family if he wants to, getting a decent wage, Kalashnikov said. In his opinion, if we build dormitories for prisoners, for example, in the Magadan region, it will solve several problems at once. The population of the region will increase, the socialization of convicts will occur, and the problem of labor shortage will be solved. This point of view was already supported by the Speaker of the State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin. He noted that prisoners should be sent to work only with their consent. But I immediately have several questions. First is about the voluntariness of this activity. Let's be honest, if you find yourself in prison, whether in Russia, in US or in Uruguay, your amount of rights is drastically reduced. And the voluntariness of the forced prison labor here will be arbitrary. If the prison authorities order you to go and build that building over there, you will get up and build it, if you don't want your life in prison to turn into hell. Let's be honest, life in some Russian prisons is already reminiscent of the good old Soviet Gulag. In some places torture is practiced, in other places prisoners are fed with meals of questionable quality, and well, there also is a forced labor of prisoners for which they are barely getting paid. In fact, all these attributes of the classic forced labor camps are already there, but formally they are being dealt with. But now the government wants to legalize it and even present it as a good thing for the prisoners themselves. In reality, it will result in the most brutal exploitation of the prisoners and the embezzlement of the money that will be allocated from the budget for the construction of the infrastructure for the labor camps and the arrangement of the convicts. There will be no normal conditions for prisoners to live and work. Now to other questions. Let's take the same Magadan region as an example. Mr. Kalashnikov says that it will be a good idea to increase the population of the region with some new workers. But there is actually a problem with unemployment in that region. Are the prisoners brought there a better quality workforce than the residents of the Magadan region themselves? And do the residents of this region agree to have their population increased by bringing in such valuable human resources? Questions also remain as to how exactly the families of prisoners will live with them in these labor camps. That is, in fact, the families of prisoners will have to voluntarily agree to live in prison conditions. I really doubt that many will agree to this. Finally, they say that prisoners can be used to replace migrant workers who were forced to leave Russia because of the pandemic. It is true that such a problem exists. There were millions of migrants working in Russia, mostly from Central Asia, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. Most of them were working in low-paying jobs as laborers, construction workers, road workers, street food vendors, cleaners and janitors. Some of them have left Russia and their place must be filled by someone else. But, guys, maybe I don't want a dude convicted of armed robbery or murder cleaning my yard instead of a friendly Tajik. What were they thinking of when they came up with this initiative? Statistics show that more than 60% of the current inmates end up behind the bars for at least the second time. Do you really want to put all of these people on the streets of the cities to work for the benefit of our society? Let me remind you that in the 1920s and 30s, when the great construction projects of socialism were being created and cheap labor was needed, the Soviet newspapers wrote about the creation of labor camps as about a great victory for humanism and the education of a new kind of man. It was said that the lost souls would be able to rethink their life choices and start a new career for the good of the motherland in these labor camps. Everything was presented through these rose-colored propaganda glasses. It seems that the state-run media decided not to change their methods this time either. What struck me the most was the article in RIA Novosti, in which the journalist Viktoria Nikiforova described forced labor Soviet camps with, I dare say, nostalgia. She presented Gulag camps as a social elevator for hundreds of thousands of ordinary people. The punishments received by prisoners in labor camps became, in the Soviet years, a ticket to a new life for former criminals. According to her article, the former peasants received a high-paying job specialty, food 3 times a day, warm housing and some kind of medical care. Warm housing, medical care, in a gulag. Modern journalism, ladies and gentlemen. There's also lots of whataboutism about US and their forced labor in private prisons. But let me remind you that 1.6 million people died in this social elevator during the 25 years of its existence, according to official data. Official. Feel free to multiply the numbers by 2 or 3 at least. That is, in fact, this social elevator had only 2 directions. In the first case, you get out of it a completely broken man with severe diseases. And in the second case, you remain forever in some unmarked grave somewhere in the Magadan region. And yes, to find a job in the Soviet Union after the release from the prison camps was practically impossible. You became not even a second-class citizen, but a third-class. Maybe this social elevator was so effective for the Soviet Union that such losses can simply be ignored. So the subject of forced labor camps will be continued for me. In about a week there will be a new video on this channel, where we are going to dive into the atmosphere of the labor camps of the USSR times, and try to find out, was it really an effective method for the accelerated development of the country? Or was it a hell on earth where innocent people suffered? Or maybe it was both?